Well, hey everyone, my name is Paul. I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Epic, and I have here with me today Kent, who is our lead pastor here, and Jake, who is also one of our teaching pastors and the location pastor at Roxborough. And we are right now in a series called Treat Yourself, and we're super excited about this series. Before we get into that, can we just have everyone who's at all of our locations give a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us right now? Woo! Yeah, so last week in this series, we talked about how you can treat yourself as to build great friendships. And today we are going to talk about marriage. And so we have three teaching pastors up here, who all of whom happen to be married. So Kent, who are you married to? How long have you been married?
My wife, Tiffany, and I have been married for 17 years, 7 months, and 11 days.
That's real specific. I would like a fact check on that. So let's get our fact checkers running that. Tiffany, you could text me. We'll verify that information.
Okay, I Googled it. We're good.
All right. Well, that obviously is going to be right. Jake, who are you married to? How long have you been married?
Yeah, I'm married to my beautiful wife, Allison, and as of last July, we have been married for 20 years, 2 decades.
Wow.
Well done, man. Well done. That's awesome. I'm married to my wife, Carly, and we, as of 9 days from now, we will have been married for 2 years. 2 years.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey, so we're talking about marriage today, and elephant in the room. 3 guys up here talking about marriage. How good could this be? So I do want to say this. So we are all married, so that's one thing. We've been talking about this, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, we've actually done our homework and had our conversations with our spouses to weigh in and kind of get their perspective on things. But I just want to acknowledge from jump that whatever happens today, this is not a complete perspective, all right? So
True.
Just take that with a grain of salt, and if there's anything you're like, man, that was dumb, that Tiffany had nothing to do with that. That was all me. So there you go.
And ultimately, the three of us here, we've known each other for 11 years now. And Carly is a little bit newer to the scene. I've known her for a few years, but I mean, Kent and Tiffany and Jake and Allison and myself and now Carly, we've been able to walk with each other through our marriages and support each other and encourage each other and pray for each other. And hopefully this can be a helpful discussion as we talk about marriage and how it's been for us and all that good stuff. And we're talking about this today because marriages is one of those things that when it's good, it's good. You know what I mean? It's great. It's awesome. I highly recommend. But when it's bad, it's bad. And it can be really tough. And I think that there are a lot of people here who have been through their challenges and a lot of people who are currently going through some challenges in their marriage. Maybe you're feeling distant. Maybe you're just having some issues. And certainly there will be several of us who are going to experience those challenges. And so we want to be able to talk about this and hopefully have just a helpful discussion about how do you have a great marriage. And that's ultimately what we want for everyone here who's married, to have a great marriage. And even if you're someone here who is not married and maybe you plan on being married but you're not married yet, or you just don't plan on being married, I think that hopefully you can take something away from this as well, which is no matter what, you have friends who are married. Like, you know people in your life who are married, and you want to be able to support them and encourage them and do all that. So hopefully there's something in here for you so you can help support those people you love who are married as well. So I want to get to the very first question today, which is there anything actually in this cup? I'll let that eat away at you for the rest of the day today. No, actually, our first question here is I want to know, and the people here want to know, when did you guys know that your wife was it? Like, when did you know that she was like, yeah.
Well, I met my wife, actually we were both in a wedding party for a friend's wedding, and so we met there, and I tell people that we got married, we walked down the aisle together the day after we met, because we were in a wedding and I escorted her down the aisle. So I'm not that romantic, but that's how I try to make it look like I am. So when we met, well, do what you can do. So we met, and I just remember looking into her eyes and talking to her, and I thought, man, I want to get to know this person more than any person I've ever met before in my life. I was just drawn to her, and I'm happy to say that since September 20th, 1997, it has been that way.
1997.
The last day I was a teenager, the day before I turned 20, I met her.
Yeah, I was still in high school.
Yeah.
Which makes you old.
I graduated early.
That's awesome. Ken, how about you?
So for me, I don't know like the moment where I was like, oh, she's it. But I do remember the moment when she first caught my eye. We were all in a car together. I was seated in the back seat, and I was directly behind her. She was in the passenger seat. And there was some music playing. It was some R&B music. And I remember seeing her just kind of like bop around in the seat up front. And I was like, who's this white girl with rhythm? What's that about? And I was like, okay, you know?
Okay.
And then not long after that, we were actually in church together, and I was on the front row on the right side of the auditorium, and it was during worship, during the singing portion. And I looked over, and she was on the front row on the other side of the church, and she just had her hand in the air, and she was just worshiping God. And at that moment, I was just like, how you doing? Like, I was like, hey, what's up?
God was doing something.
Let's talk. Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know for me, my wife Carly, fun fact, we actually met, we were both volunteering at Night to Shine. That's how we met. So there's
cool?
that. And this was early on our first week of dating. We had talked about how I have never really had a terrible date experience. Never a terrible date, you know, but I love bad date stories. This is the irony. I love bad date stories. So Carly set up our third date to be an intentionally bad date. Like that was the premise going in. So just all throughout the date, she was just doing stuff that you should not do on a third date. And one of them was at the end of the night, she had a cake delivered to our table in this restaurant in public, in front of everybody, and had the waiters like put this on, happy 1 week anniversary.
So bad.
So bad. I do not recommend that you do that. I do not. But you know what? It made me laugh so much. The whole date made me laugh so much, and she's been making me laugh ever since then. So that was a crucial moment for us,
awesome.
I think. So hey, so I know that early on, especially when you're dating and you first meet this person, it can be really exciting, it can be really fun. But now, 17 years in, 20 years in, I mean, how do you keep that up? How do you still have? Is it even possible to have fun like that? Like you had early on.
Yeah. I think it's definitely possible. I think it's definitely important, but you have to be intentional, right? So you know sometimes early on you're thinking, oh, we'll always be all into each other, and it'll be the tension all the time. But life happens. Life gets busy. And particularly if you have kids, then there's a whole other distraction for you to have. And so what happened for Allison and I is we were super compatible. We were really good business partners. We were getting things done. We were thoughtful to each other, but we didn't get to spend time with each other and enjoy being best friends. And what would happen is we would say, man, we haven't been on a date for a while. We should be on a date soon. And then 2 weeks go by and we look at each other and we're like, we didn't go on a date, did we? And then 2 more weeks would go by, and we're like, we're gonna go a date when we have a free night, and we never had a free night. And so we drew a line in the sand. We said, Wednesday night is date night. Only one problem. We had 3 little kids and no money. And so we went with in dates. And so on Wednesday nights, we'd have dinner, we'd clean up, and it actually became our kids' favorite day of the week as well, because we would pick out a good long cartoon, put it on, give them some ice cream, and we'd say to Anya, our oldest, and say, listen, come get us if someone's bleeding. I don't just mean like a little cut. I mean like bleeding, or there's a fire. And we're gonna be over in the other room, and you guys stay, and we have some time we can catch up and just enjoy each other. And so we made in dates. And honestly, Wednesday nights are my favorite time of the week. I always look forward to it, and it's locked in. It's her and me.
That's cool. So date night. Date night, big deal.
Date nights are huge. And they don't have to be expensive, right? Like you said, it's when Tiff and I early on, you know, we would go on these dates each week, and we had a $10 limit. And what was cool is we took turns planning the date. And I know some of you are like, what can you do for $10?
Can't even get an appetizer for $10.
Yeah, you gotta be creative. But that was part of the fun, was like, what could you come up with for $10? And we had a ton of fun doing that. So love date nights. I think it's really important. I think ultimately it's not about what you do, it's about time together. Right? I mean, that's the thing that really matters. It's making sure that you're staying connected and being intentional about that. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, you know, I heard someone say this about rest, about rhythms of rest that I think actually apply to rhythms of connectedness in a relationship. They said this: you need to make sure that you divert daily, that you withdraw weekly, and that you abandon annually.
So divert daily, withdraw weekly,
Abandon annually.
Annually, got
Yeah,
it.
so here's how that plays out. Like, you need time each day where you kind of divert away from just all the going on, the hustle and the bustle of the day, right? And just get alone and just talk. How are you doing? Like, really, how are you doing? What's going on?
And not just talking about the errands and the things that need to be done, but actually connecting about each other.
Yeah, and then withdraw weekly. That could be a date night, could be something else. And then abandon annually. My wife and I, from time to time, we go on vacation with just each other, and we leave our kids with somebody that we trust and love. And I'm telling you, if you can get a vacation alone with your spouse without your kids, sweet baby Jesus, that's a good day. So I love my kids, but that's a lot of fun. And then I think, too, whenever you have time with your spouse, I think it's important. You're looking for 3 types of interactions. And so, and I try to make this memorable, all right? So here's what they are. It's face-to-face, all right? It's side-by-side. And then the third one is belly button to belly button. All right, so let me explain. So face-to-face.
Oh, boy, here we go, okay.
Face-to-face, that's all about talking. Right? It's all about catching up and being connected to each other and learning about each other's day and all that kind of stuff. So face-to-face, you need time to talk. And then side-by-side, I think it's important as a couple to make sure that you're doing some things that you both enjoy doing together. Right? And so for Tiff and I, we love going to movies. And so as often as we can, we'll go out to a movie together. So that's a big deal. And then belly button to belly button. Look, the question was, how do you keep it fun? Sex is fun. All right, so for those of you that are taking notes,
write that down, actually.
You should write that down. Sex is fun.
Thank you.
They say, and I'm not. I know we're being fun, but really, I mean, intimacy in the context of a marriage is really important, and that being a priority and figuring out what that is for you as a couple is really important. In
fact,
I know
the number one question that therapists get asked in a counseling session is how often. And people
how often?
Really that's the question that's on their mind.
Yeah, I have a theory about that. I'm a proponent. If you don't have a plan or anything, and not that there should be a plan, I don't know. I think any day that starts with T. So like Tuesday, Thursday, today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, and then you need a day of rest.
Oh my gosh.
Was
I think it's very important for you guys to know that only 1 out of 3 pastors recommend this.
Is this that dumb thing that Tiffany had nothing to do with?
Probably.
Yeah, that would be that, yeah.
Probably. So, okay, wow.
I'm sorry.
All right, so yeah, cool.
But seriously though, all right. For every couple, it is different. Like the frequency, this is a real thing. It's a real issue. And if you can't figure it out together, then you do need to go talk to somebody who can help you work through that, because it's an important part of being connected. It's an important part of intimacy.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And so that's kind of the fun aspect of marriage, and it's so important, so huge. But now I'm get to dig in now. What if it's not fun though? At the times where it's not fun, what if you're not seeing eye to eye? What if there's friction, which we all experience? How do you guys deal with that? Like, what do we do when there's friction?
Yeah, I heard our location pastor in Center City, Will Gwynn, and his wife Marissa, they say this all the time. This is like their go-to advice for couples. They say, hey, you got to remember that whenever you have an argument or a discussion or there's some friction or whatever it is, you got to remember that you're on the same team.
It's good.
Like we're on the same team. We want the same things. We want to have a great relationship with each other. And so you got to remember you're on the same team. And then I think the thing that I would add to that, just from Tiff and I, is remembering that when you have an argument or there's some friction or discussion, I think remembering not just that you're on the same team, but remembering that the goal of that discussion is not to win, but to understand. Like that's the goal. It's not, the goal isn't to win. The goal is to understand. The goal, and if you'll keep those two things as like foundational thoughts for your discussions, it will inform how you approach that discussion. And so you won't use like inflammatory language like you always and you never, but instead you'll be like, hey, could you help me understand this? Or, hey, I feel like this. Can we just have,
and it's hard to do. We want to win. We really want to win. The biggest mistakes that I have made personally is when I forget these things, when I forget that we're on the same team, and I forget that this is about understanding, not about anything. That's every time I look back, I'm like, that was the cause of our argument, was because of me doing that.
Yeah. I was talking to Tiff about this, and she said, the other thing that I would really want you to say is for those people who avoid conflict, just kind of conflict averse, it's like, I would just rather not. She says, make sure you tell those people to have the guts to have the conversation. Because here's the thing, in a relationship, you got to care enough about your relationship and care enough about each other to confront. Not in a mean way or an aggressive way or I'm going to get you way, but hey, I care about this thing being right. I'm not just going to stuff it down.
It'll build up.
It'll build up and hold on to it, and then all of a sudden, blah, 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 it's like, whoa, where did that come from? It's because you're not having those little conversations along the way.
Yeah, and Carly and I, something that's really worked for us is to actually schedule those conversations as well. Because what happens is, I'm ready to have this conversation, but Carly might not be ready to have the conversation, right? Or Carly might be ready to have the conversation right now, but I might not be ready. And so if we actually say, hey, can we talk about this on Saturday when we have a little bit of free time? What that does is it allows us both to prepare for the conversation and to come in like calm and rational, right? And we're not, our defenses are not up, or we're not super emotional at that time, right? And it's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, I know that we're similar in some ways. So we're ready to have the conversation right now, like as soon as it happens. But Tiff in our relationship, she needs time to think about it and prepare her thoughts.
Yeah, Carly's the
and be
same
able
way.
to come to the table. But it is important at the end of the day, man, you got to open up the cage and let the gorilla out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to have the conversation. It's important.
It doesn't just go away
It doesn't.
unless you deal with it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and it makes me think that unfortunately, I think in our marriages, the people that we're closest with, sometimes we just lose our minds and forget just reasonable, interactive rules, right? So don't raise your voice. They're not deaf. It doesn't help. Don't take cheap shots. Don't bring up stuff from 2 years ago. It's so easy because we're familiar to just take for granted, like I have the right to do this. No, this is your spouse. And you want to be able to communicate, you want to understand, you don't want to just win, and taking those cheap shots, that sort of thing doesn't help.
Yeah, I think reminding yourselves in the heat of the moment that, hey, my job is to respond, not react.
Yeah,
I'm going to respond, not react. If you react, then you're going to match tone, and then that becomes an issue, right? It just escalates out of control because it starts. Here's how it works: it's like blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Right? And then all of a sudden you're fighting about how you're fighting.
Is that the language that you and Tiff use too?
That is the exact language that we use.
That's interesting. Yeah, and Ken, you actually have done a great job of ever since I've known you, you have taught me that. I mean, it's not just in a marriage context either. This is all of everything, right? To not match someone's tone when things start getting heated, and it just saves so much headache. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah.
And that's a biblical concept, right? Like James wrote that we should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so quick to listen. Man, I know that for me, when I'm in a debate, whether it's with Allison or with somebody else, while they're talking, like their words are coming in, but I'm formulating my response. It's gonna be so good, It's just finish.
I never do that.
You never do that? Well,
okay,
I do.
Maybe,
I do enough for both of us.
Maybe sometimes.
So, listen, and a good way to do this is after they share with you what they want to say, repeat back to them what you heard, because you might say, you repeat back, and they're like, "That's not what I said," and you don't want to run with what they didn't want to mean. So, always listening. Don't be quick to talk, and then don't be quick to get angry, right? And so, I talked to my wife Allison about this, and she said, we have to believe the best about each other. And so when something happens, you don't just assume they did that because they knew I wouldn't want them to do that. They didn't care. Don't get angry. Just take your time. Give a chance to understand, like we've been saying. And so I think that's just a super helpful principle. And I think that oftentimes we fight over stuff that we don't need to fight about because we don't really listen, we don't understand, and we get mad quickly, and that escalates things.
I think a lot of us get ourselves into trouble with that when we're trying to win, and we're not listening, and we're being quick to be angry, and all these things we talked about. It can be so toxic to a marriage that you're trying to build together. So I think it'll be helpful to even talk about other things that are toxic to our marriages that are maybe even eroding our marriage, and we don't even realize it. We're not doing anything about it right now. So what are some other things that you guys have found to be toxic to a relationship or to a marriage specifically?
Yeah. I think we have a really unique perspective because of our jobs. We're pastors, and so I feel like we have a front row seat to the stories of a lot of people's lives, and we get to see things play out. And so one of the things that it's like, man, it's really hard to come back from this particular thing. Hands down, it's just infidelity. And so a relationship outside of the marriage, oh gosh, that's a tough one. And here's the thing about infidelity. I think that the issue isn't that, oh man, there was some a poor choice that was made as far as the relationship and starting something with somebody else. I think the bigger issue is that before you ever got to the affair, there were like 12 other decisions that you made that led there. And so I think what's important is to make sure that you set your boundaries far away from that action that's going to be hard to recover from. And that's the issue, is we set our boundaries too close to whatever that action is. We're like, oh, well, we can go this far. And so I'm like, no, my marriage matters to me, so I'm going to set my boundaries way back here. And so like, here's how that plays out for me. Like, I'm never alone with a female, ever. Never alone. And you might say, well, that's extreme. Well, I know what I have to lose. In fact, I've got a piece of paper in my wallet that I've carried with me since I've been married. It's literally titled, What I Have to Lose. And there's a few things on that list, and one of those things is my marriage to my wife, Tiffany, and another thing that's on that list is the respect of my children. And those things matter too much to me to leave them to chance because I didn't set the boundaries that I needed to set. An affair, it starts with saying, I'm going to entertain a thought. And then it goes from I'm going to entertain a thought to, hey, I'm going to throw a compliment that way, or I'm going to take a compliment back, and then I'm going to set up have an opportunity to flirt a little bit, or hey, I'm going to make arrangements so that we can spend more time together than we would have had I not.
I'm not going to tell my spouse about this thing
right?
that happened. I'm gonna just kind of keep that to myself a little bit, right?
So it's all these little decisions that take you to a place that you never wanted to go in the first place and cost you way more than you intended it to cost.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying too, that little thing in your wallet, what I love about that is what that is you have been very clear about what is most important to you in your life. And I think that's really huge for us because oftentimes I think that we will, when things get hard, and again, in the context of marriage, when things get hard and things get challenging, and we kind of, you want to avoid that sometimes, right? So then what happens is these other opportunities will always be there to take the easier way, to take a shortcut, and to get a little bit more of, this is easier in the short term, so let me do this instead of doing the hard work of, let me have the hard conversation with my spouse. Let me do the hard work of cultivating a good relationship and a good marriage with my wife. There'll always be something else in the short term that you can settle for that's a shortcut that will rob you of the most important things later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, something else that's super toxic to marriage is pornography. And so that's been something that's been around for forever, but with the advent of the internet and then mobile devices, it's just spiked. It's gotten out of control. And I just read something in Psychology Today last week that said that 98% of men and 73% of women have viewed internet pornography in the last 6 months.
98%.
Mm-hmm.
70
and 73%.
Significant.
Wow.
So it's just changed the game. And so you might hear that and think to yourself, well, then what's the big deal? It's part of culture. It's normal. But here's why. We're going to talk about this for a whole message later on this year. But here's why this is important for our topic today, marriage. When you decide, I'm not going to put in the hard work of developing intimacy with my spouse, but instead I'm gonna go ahead and take the easy way out and just go and take a cheap substitute for that, man, you undermine the value and the trust and the relationship you can have with your spouse. And so that's a huge deal. And it's damaging to yourself. You think this is what I want, but over time, it gets a grip on you and it starts to control you, and it steals from you something that's so much better, so much better. It's not loving to your spouse because you're saying to them, you can't fulfill me sexually the way that I need, or I'm not willing to put into work to have that kind of relationship with you, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And then it's dishonoring to God because God's design for us is that we would have sex within the context of a marriage, and so it can be safe, it can be just personal and intimate, and honoring to Him, and a beautiful thing that He gave us. And so, it really robs us. And so if you find yourself in a place where you're like, man, I've been struggling with this, and it can be such a strong grip, I just encourage you to take a step to talk with somebody who wants you to achieve God's best for you, and share that with them so there can be accountability, There's software you can put on your devices to help you with that. There's organizations like Harvest USA that's here in the Philly area, free help in this area, professional counseling, something like that.
Harvest USA.
Yeah,
That's
Harvest
right. USA. Okay.
That's right. And so just encourage you, I think hiding it is what makes it even more powerful than it needs to be, right?
Yeah, what's interesting about what you're talking about, I think that setting boundaries and then making sure that you don't go walking down a foolish path and that you have a plan is really important, because here's the deal. Nobody plans to wreck their marriage. They just don't plan not to. That's why it's important to get help, right? Nobody plans to wreck their marriage. They just don't plan not to. So you got to have boundaries, and you got to do the work of getting help when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea, just that there are things that I think that present themselves as shortcuts. I would caution anybody, if there's anything in your marriage that you're taking the easy way out instead of engaging with your spouse and doing that work, that should be a red flag for any of us. I think has the potential to be very toxic to us. Jake, anything else that you think it might be toxic to a marriage or might, again, just kind of erode what we're trying to build here, which is a great marriage?
Yeah, I think that the foundation of what's the purpose of marriage, what we understand that to be, is really important. I know that if we just think marriage is about what's going to make me happy and what I want, we're kind of missing out on God's bigger plan. And so Scripture teaches us that marriage is meant to reflect the most important, the most beautiful, forever relationship we could ever have, and that's our relationship with God. And so we read Ephesians 5, Apostle Paul told us that the way that we love our spouse should represent the way that Jesus loves us, and he came and he laid down his life for us, right? He sacrificed for us. He gave himself completely for us without thinking about what is in this for me. And he says, this is the way you should love each other. And that's such a radical type of love. It's so not natural that whenever we can show that, we can follow God's blueprint and share a relationship with our spouse in that type of relationship, it's such a good example of what God's love is like. And I think that's why Satan just loves to attack and throws these things at healthy marriages. He hates them because they reflect the kind of love that's possible with God. And so that's why God has to be at the center of it, and God's plan for it should be at the center of it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've been a fly on the wall, kind of watching Jake and his marriage and see his commitment to Allison and Allison's commitment to him. And I think one of the things that's maybe different than maybe what we see in culture a lot of times is like their undying commitment to each other. And same thing in my marriage. Like, I know that Tiffany's my ride or die. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? And here's the thing: like, when we get in a heated discussion, like, we never threaten divorce. That's not even an option, because she knows I'm down for you and you're down for me, and
we can't move forward if
we're
that's
in this
happen.
together.
That's always a threat.
Yeah.
You can't build something great if that's always being hung over your head.
That's a tough thing. Now, as a disclaimer or a caveat to that, listen, biblically, there are cases for divorce, absolutely. If you're in an abusive situation, you need to get out. Like, that's not okay. That's not what God wants for you. It's not what we want for you. So you need to get out. But, man, within the context of marriage, you and your spouse, there's something about knowing that no matter what, I'm here for you. No matter how difficult this gets, you can bet that I'm going to be in your corner. Man, when you got that going two ways, what can grow out of that is beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's like a lot of the stuff that it can be very toxic, again, to a marriage and things like that. And hopefully that was helpful to kind of think through some of those things. But if someone is going through some things right now and is looking for, like, where do we start? How do we start to build a foundation for a great marriage? What can we do there? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I get to do lots of weddings and have done lots of weddings over the years, and this is my go-to advice in the ceremony, which is you got to keep God first. You have to keep God first, both as individuals, but then you also have to work to keep God first together as a couple and to seek God first. And here's the thing: like we go this thing where it's like I just want to find the one. If I could just find the one, and we work so hard to find the one, all of our energy, all of our effort, and then we find the one, and we're like, oh, I found them. And it's like, oh, they're gonna make me happy. They're gonna make me fulfilled. They're gonna add so much value to my life. They're the missing piece and all this stuff. But here's the thing, when your spouse was never meant to be your one. They're supposed to be your two. God is supposed to be your one. And when you try to put your spouse in that top spot, what you do is you put undue pressure on them to be for you what they can't be for you. Only God can be that for you.
They're only going to let you down in that scenario.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like what's interesting about that is oftentimes at the beginning of relationships, you idolize the other person. You idolize all their qualities. Like, I love the fact that she's like so on top of things and she's so organized. But then at some point they let you down, or it's just like it becomes too much and you're like, all of a sudden you go from idolizing them to demonizing them. You're like, oh, she's so controlling. It's like, you love that about her. What are you talking about? Now you're like, ugh. Stop it. Listen, only God should be your one. And if you keep him in that place, and if you as a couple say, God's my one, I'm not a half looking for another half. I'm a whole person because God is the one who completes me.
Yeah, and that was a good opportunity that I didn't get married until I was 32, and so we actually, the best gift that Carly and I were able to give each other was to walk into our relationship as a whole person. And we weren't looking for the other person to complete us. We weren't looking for it to put that pressure on each other. We were putting God first. We did that. And so what happens then is you get to just enjoy each other and just love each other and serve each other unconditionally, because I don't need this person to fulfill every single one of my dreams and hopes and desires, right? If you're single right now, it's one of the biggest things I would encourage you with is work on that and work on being a whole person and working on your relationship with God. And you walk into, it's the best gift that you will give your future spouse when you meet them, and it's I promise, it's the best gift that you could possibly give them.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I think a great practice is to pray together as a couple every day. It's so good. Two things happen. One, you invite God into your situation, and I don't know about you, but in every area of life, I want to have God inside of that. And so when you stop and pray, you invite God in. And then the second thing that happens is you humble yourself before God and you humble yourself before the other person. Boy, that changes the dynamic in a relationship. And I think that if you're fighting and you can't resolve it, if you say, let's go pray, you got to kind of change your attitude before you pray. And you can't pray, God, your kingdom come, your will be done. And you're like, right now, I'm trying to get my will done. And you got to kind of change that script. And so praying together every day, number one thing I tell couples.
It's hard to stay mad when you pray.
Oh, yeah.
Impossible.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, so praying together could be a great tip for you guys. We're running out of time here. I love having these conversations. We could talk for hours. So here's one last question for you. Especially for anyone who's listening here who's like, oh, what can we do? You've been married 17 years and 20 years. So knowing what you know now, which is more than you did before, what would you tell a younger you in the beginning of your marriage?
Yeah, I actually talked to Tiffany about this in particular, and here's what she said, and I would totally agree with her. She said, if we could talk to younger us, we would say, starting out, hey, stay out of debt and start investing for the future, and start now. There's a class called Financial Peace University that we offer at the church as one of our life groups, and man, if we'd have done that when we were 22 and then actually lived according to those principles, it would have benefited us in so many ways. And here's the thing, so many stressors in a marriage come down to money. So many fights are around finances. And so if you get it right, you have an opportunity when you're young, you have an opportunity to get it right before you ever get it wrong. And so that's what I would say.
Awesome. How about you, Jake?
Yeah, a lot of things, but I think I would tell myself, hey, it's going to be hard. Like there's going to be some difficulties in your life, but just keep trusting God, lean on him in those times, and draw closer together through those hard times. Like, don't turn against each other in the hard times. Lean on each other, trust each other, and if we do that, man, we're going to make it through. We're going to make it through.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that today, and on that point, today we wanted to do this especially for the couples who find themselves just going through a rough spot, and for whatever reason, maybe it's a really extreme rough spot, maybe it's just a minor rough spot, a little bit of distance, whatever, and knowing that you have hope. Knowing that there is hope, knowing that, and also that you're surrounded right now by other couples who have been married for a long time, and you would be shocked at what they've made it through. You'd be shocked at what they've made it through, and to know that you're surrounded and that we are in your corner, that we want you to have a great marriage, that we want to support you. So if there's any way that we can do that, reach out to us, and we'll do that for you, and reach out to each other and have the support network. You cannot do marriage alone. You are not meant to do marriage alone. It takes a village, truly, and you want to have people around you who can support you, who can encourage you, who can challenge you. That's ultimately what we want for every single person here who's married. If you're thinking about married, this is what we want for you. And again, for anyone here who's single, just, hey, this is the way, like, be that person. Be that person who can support and love your friends who are married in that kind of way. So hopefully this has been good for you, and hopefully this has been helpful for you. We've had a ton of fun. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hey, let's pray. Father, we love you, and we thank you so much. I thank you, God, for every single married couple who is here today. God, you know our needs. You know what's going on. You know the things that we are scared to tell anybody else. Some of us are scared to tell our spouse. Some of us are scared as a couple to share with anybody else. God, you know our need and you see our need. I pray that you would give us the wisdom. You would give us the courage that we need. You would give us whatever support that we need to start building a great marriage that honors you and that puts you first. God, I pray for anyone here who's single, who's hoping for this, who's praying for this. God, let them know that you're walking with them. Anyone who's just single, and just, God, encourage us. Let us know that you're with us. Let us know that you remind us that you have a great plan for every single one of us. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.